Okay, we are
Oh,
live.
yeah.
My God, this technology really plays tricks on us, man. Sonal, have you killed the flies? You know the flies are going to be in the show. You need to get rid of them.
I
Don't
don't
sit
have a
outdoor. I know the weather is good. Come inside.
Do you know, I'm still affecting.
I don't
I'm
see
still,
Now people are watching us. We have to behave ourselves. We
Actually,
yeah, and remember, a phone call might come in between because I won't have my airplane mode on. So
how
just,
come
well,
How come Annie always has a disclaimer?
I'm just telling you now.
Sometimes it's a phone call.
she said airplane to me
I
about
love
10
your
times. I
disclaimers.
want to kill her because that's like a sob story in my life. I want to get on that airplane and you keep going on airplane mode, airplane mode. If it is that bloody simple, get on the airplane mode.
So I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
We have our guests that have started joining in, Annie. So I'm not going to take any more time and us going on behind the scenes, even though it's so much more fun and we're having such a lot of fun here. But good evening, everybody, and welcome to you, me, and her. And I know you guys have now been watching us for almost over 5 or 6 weeks that we've been doing this, and we have consciously been picking topics which are of interest, which people are also interacting with us. We like interactive topics because we want questions from the audience and we're able to answer it. And that's how the whole concept started. It was a table conversation and we'd be chatting, and people wanted to know what our opinion was, what the experts thought. And we said, hey, why the hell should we not take it online and bring the experts to do this? And I'm going to start like I always do by introducing hi Cheery, thank you so much. Yes, we're all looking fabulous. I'm going to actually introduce I'm going to introduce my co-hosts. So I have to tell you this. Initially, when I met the two of them, I thought that they were distinctly different people, which they still are. But we say that when you find a common goal together, you tend to start becoming like each other. And now the three of us have found that common goal together, and we are doing the same things and saying the same things and talking the same language. And these are two committed women who are finding interesting topics, interesting experts to talk about it. And I'm lucky to be a part of this team. Let me introduce my co-host, Annie, the naughty one. Annie, say hello to everybody.
Hello. Charlie says to say hello, so I'm saying hello. Hi. I'm also very good. I'm also very good.
This is the only time she listens to me, guys. Just FYI. Sonal, the not so naughty one supposedly, but let's not go behind the scenes. That she's just with all of us. Like all of us. Say hello to everybody. Before I introduce the topic,
let them have the impression that they have of me so far.
Actually, I'm not really introducing the topic, but I want to introduce the guest, and I want to tell you the topic today is domestic abuse. And I'm going to bring on Ruth Darlene, who's with us, and she's joined us early in the morning to advise us and guide us and tell us what's going on and what is making things happen the way it is. So let me bring on Ruth before I say the rest of it. Okay, let's find Ruth. We've got Ruth here with us. Ruth, hi.
Good. Hello. I was going to say good morning, but good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, great to have you.
Oh, so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for waking up so early in the morning to show us the way, show us the light, as they say. Thanks for being here.
Well, there's no light here. Let me tell you, but I'll do my best. Thank you so much.
There is at the end of the tunnel. We're waiting for it.
That's right.
Yeah. So Ruth, I'm going to actually introduce you formally, officially, and I'm going to read this out because there's so much that you do. And this is how it goes. Ruth Darlene is the founder and executive director of Women SV, or Women of Silicon Valley. I know you all are thinking technology, but believe me, she's handling the domestic abuse part of it. A nonprofit program that has served over 1,400 women in the past 9 years. Women SV serves women in the middle to upper income areas, middle to upper income areas who are trapped in a relationship with a powerful, sophisticated abuser. Oh my God, okay. That sounds like a bit scary. Their focus is on addressing more subtle forms of abuse, such as emotional, financial, legal, and technological. Women SV works to promote the right of every woman and child to be free and safe in their home. We couldn't need this more at this point in the current scenario because the cases in India are growing by the day, and we are clearly this is an issue that needs to be addressed. In fact, somebody asked me this question very recently, because Ruth, I don't think you're aware, but I've also volunteered my counseling services pro bono to the government of India for domestic abuse. So I work a lot with that. And somebody actually asked me that, is this the pandemic, or is the domestic abuse the next pandemic? It has gotten so bad. So we are very lucky to have you here. From here on, I'm going to take it to Annie to talk some more about the topic, and of course, address the questions to you. Annie, on to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ruth, thank you so much for getting up this morning. It is an early start. And, as Shani says, the topic, and as you know, you're the expert, it is, domestic abuse. Whether you're in a marriage or whether you're in an intimate relationship, it affects, what the figures show, 1 in 10, 1 out of 10 men, and 3 out of 10 women. Now, I'm not sure if there's an update on that, but it is, what can I say? It's the most, as I know it, it's the most underreported issue by both sexes, which actually means that the figures could be way higher, which means it's really important to discuss. Now, what we also see from the figures, that women are the ones that are overwhelmingly abused, and hence why we're going to put the spotlight on that particular segment today, which is why we're so grateful, Ruth, that you're here today. Now, Ruth, I wouldn't forget anything else. I don't think I would even recognize the normal relationship. I'm in an Indian family. There are certain things I accept in relationships. It's patriarchal. So if somebody had to analyze their relationship, how do they know that they are in an abusive relationship?
Well, thanks so much for that question, Annie. And I do want to start by acknowledging what you were saying initially about the statistics, that it does happen to men as well as women, and it can really strike at the core of their identity as a male being impacted by an abusive partner. Women can be perpetrators, men can be victims, but because the overwhelming majority of victims of domestic violence are female, 90% according to the Department of Justice here in the United States, that's why we focus on women. But I do want to say too that globally, the World Health Organization has determined that 1 in 3 women will be raped or beaten during her lifetime, usually by someone she knows. And we're just talking about the more overt signs of violence, physical or sexual violence. And that's not even beginning to cover the more subtle forms of abuse. And that's what we concentrate on at Women of Silicon Valley, Women SV. We focus on these more subtle forms of abuse that are harder to identify. I read a column for our local paper, the Los Altos Town Crier, and every time my column appears, I have women who call me afterwards and say, I didn't recognize I was in an abusive relationship until I read your column. And it's because they don't have broken bones or bruises or blood to show for what's happening to them. It's a slippery slope when you get involved with somebody who's got a controlling aspect to their personality. In the beginning, it's all roses. There, if I may use he for perpetrator and she for victim or survivor, while acknowledging, as I said before, that men can be victims and women can be perpetrators, but just for efficiency, let me refer to perpetrators as he. So he may start off being very charming to win and woo her. And as women, our hearts are most vulnerable organ, I think, because when we fall in love, we tend to be very forgiving. And they said love is blind for a reason. Love is also sometimes deaf and dumb. We are totally bowled over sometimes when we fall in love, and it can make it hard to recognize these early warning signs. If you're going out to a restaurant, is he starting to decide what's best for you to order before you go? Or is he trying to influence you about what you wear? If you're at a party, does he get upset because you're talking to another man at the party for maybe a little bit too long? Is he texting you multiple times a day to check in with you? In the beginning, it looks like, oh, how sweet, he cares about me. Isn't this love? Over time, it can begin to look like stalking, especially if he's starting to show up at your work or places where he's unannounced. Are you starting to feel like you have to edit your words, edit what you say before you say it, because you're worried about his response? Is money a hot button for him? Is he either very, very generous in the beginning, and over time, do you see him become more and more controlling around finances? That's something to watch. How he talks about other women in his life is another thing to look out for. How does he talk about his mother, his sisters, previous relationships? Does he say, you're the most beautiful woman, you're the smartest woman I've ever met, you should, oh, you won't believe my crazy ex-wife or my crazy ex-girlfriend? Is he very good at playing the victim? That's getting into the characteristics of a perpetrator. We'll talk about more, I hope, more about that later. But how do you recognize these early warning signs? It could be financial abuse, emotional abuse, gaslighting, where he's getting inside your head and trying to convince you that he didn't really say what you thought he said, that he didn't really do what you thought he did. And over time, they can be so persuasive, so convincing that you start to doubt your own perspective, your own memory, your own grasp on reality, perhaps over time, your own sanity. And then legal abuse. Sometimes we have women who end up getting arrested or put on psychiatric holds, being made to look crazy or abusive by their partner. So financial abuse, technological abuse is another huge area where women can be controlled, surveilled, harassed, and terrorized through the use of technology. These are not the usual forms of abuse you think of. And as little girls, we're not doing a good enough job teaching them how to recognize these early warning signs.
Right. So if I had to put it into, as much as I could into boxes, what is the typical profile of an abuser, and what's the typical profile of one that is being abused then?
Yes. So typical profile of an abuser, here's the tricky part, because they all look great in the beginning. So they're charming, they're educated, they're successful. I'm talking about the typical profile of a powerful, sophisticated abuser. So this is that sort of small subset of abuser that I'm talking about. Most people, let's hope that most people who have positions of power and influence are wielding that power and influence with care and moral authority and goodness. And they go home and they kiss their partners and hug their children and have a healthy home life. I'm not talking about that type of successful professional. I'm talking about the doctor, lawyer, engineer, CEO, religious leader, therapist, physician, a law enforcement official who has a wonderful public image, charming, educated, sophisticated, may even give to worthy causes, may coach the local kids' soccer team. Says all the right things. On the surface, looks very good on paper. And then there's another dark side that usually only his intimate partner or children ever see. And that's the side that is controlling, that lies easily, lies often, even when he doesn't need to. It's almost like he wants to keep in practice. He tends to lack empathy, tends to lack remorse, tends to lack self-reflection, tends to lack any sense of moral compass. Truth varies according to his needs. He's very good at playing the victim. He likes to be, must be, demands to be the center of attention, the center of the universe. He must be right. He's about power and control, winning. He must win every argument. He must be right, even when he's wrong. Power, money, sex, revenge, these are the driving forces in this type of personality. And here's the most disturbing feature that many of them have. Many of them seem almost to enjoy causing pain or suffering or fear to the very people that they should be protecting the most, their partners, their children.
Gosh, okay. So, I mean, so there's no such thing as a perfect man then, because it's a bit worrying then. So what about the person being abused? So what kind of a person does that abuser require then?
Yes, and here's another misperception that, what did she do to provoke him? Or what is it about her background that makes her attract this kind of person? This is kind of victim blaming. And the reason is that I say there's two types of women who can get involved with this type of personality. The first is the type of a woman who grows up in a family where it's natural, in quotes, to not be treated with respect, to grow up feeling like you're being controlled, told what to do and when to do it, what to think. But there's another type of personality that grows up in a family where everybody's treated with respect and love and compassion, and they are free to express themselves and do and say and believe what they want. So this pretty much covers every woman, whether you grew up in a healthy home or an unhealthy home, because these guys start off so charming. They are on their best behavior in the beginning. There's something called the cycle of abuse or the cycle of violence. And there's a period where it's called the honeymoon stage, hearts and flowers, where it's all roses, where they are monitoring what they say and do, very conscious of the impact on their partner to be. In the beginning stage, when they're wooing and winning, it's all good. And so sort of women sort of slip into this type of relationship because he's bringing her flowers, he's asking her what movie she'd like to go to, what restaurant, he's attentive to her, he's smart, he's charming, he's on the way up, or he has reached quite a stage of advancement in his career. So her heart is given to a person like this. And when we give our hearts, we give up our power to someone, thinking that they're going to treat our hearts with respect and care and compassion. And what happens is we become putty in a sophisticated, calculating, manipulative perpetrator's hands, because we've given our heart, we've let our guard down, and we are trusting that they will treat us with the same care and trust and love that we are treating them. So over time, this can take a toll on a confident, strong, resilient woman's whole personality.
I can imagine. Thank you, Ruth. Sonal.
So once you know that you are in an abusive relationship, are there any steps that one can take to actually get out of the situation?
Yes. So step one is actually recognizing that you're in an abusive relationship. And that can begin with checking in internally. How are you feeling in your life now? Are you losing your a sense of perspective, your confidence, your happiness, your joie de vivre? Are you feeling like you have to edit what you say before you say it? Are you beginning to feel like you're a prisoner in the relationship, perhaps a prisoner in your own home? Once you start to put language on what's being done to you, gaslighting, financial abuse, coercive control, when you start to get language around it, that's the first step to begin to develop a strategy to deal with it. So that internal check, how am I feeling, language to put on what's happening to me, and now what do I do about it? So one of the tactics of an abuser is to isolate his partner so that she won't have anyone to share her story with, get an alternate perspective on it, reality check, allies to gather around her. He wants to be the sole arbiter of her reality. So what's the strategy to that? For her to slowly, quietly begin to re-engage with her companions, her friends, her extended family members, if she's lost contact with them, because many of them do start to lose contact with the outside world. It can be a very scary thing for a woman to start to share her story about what's happening to her. There's such shame, such social stigma attached to this issue in middle to upper income areas. And then if you come from a different culture, I have many women from the Indian culture who are suffering the extra added burden of the huge social stigma attached to domestic violence, the huge social stigma attached to divorce. And so many of them are living in silent suffering, deep sorrow and terror, afraid of becoming outcasts in their family, in their community, if they take a step forward and start thinking about divorce. What's the step to overcoming that shame? It's starting to share their story with a safe, trusted person. Once they start sharing their story with somebody or joining a support group quietly, secretly, they will see other women in similar situations. Earlier, we were talking about when women find a common cause, they tend to grow more and more like one another and speak the same language, no matter where they may be from. That's the case when women start to join a support group that have other women in it from similar demographics, similar backgrounds, and involved with similar perpetrators. So a woman will say, you know, my husband came in at, 2 o'clock in the morning. He's pounding on the bed, telling me how useless and stupid and lazy I am. And another woman in the group will say, what? You mean that's not normal? My husband does that all the time. Her husband's a doctor. The other lady's husband is an engineer, but they're committing these same acts. So many of them are so similar. It's like they all, like some of our ladies say, I think we all married the same man. So that sense of bonding and community and solidarity that women get, reaching out to other women, connecting with them, overcoming that shame, because abuse thrives in secrecy, silence, and isolation. And all those things must be overcome in order to get help. But it's so important for her not to share her plans with her partner. And that's another hardship for her, because we're taught to be honest in our feelings, to be authentic, to share what we're thinking, what we're planning, how dissatisfied we are. But in this type of situation, relationship, she will be punished for speaking the truth. Anything in the hands of an abuser can be turned into a weapon, even the truth. As we've seen, even her love for him. He becomes a kind of emotional, spiritual energy vampire, sucking the life out of her. And it's not like you can heal this type of relationship. The smarter a woman is, the more compassion she has, the longer she'll tend to stay in a relationship like this, thinking there's something that she can do to make things better. Once she reaches that impasse and she discovers it's not her fault, she didn't cause it, she can't fix it. This is one problem she can't solve, one crisis that she can't solve herself without outside help. Sometimes the only solution is to leave, is to escape, and to do it quietly. Because once he gets wind of her plans, that's when her physical life becomes in danger. Even if there's been no physical violence before, over 70% of domestic violence incidents happen after a woman leaves a relationship. We wonder, why does she stay? The other question to ask is, how does she get the courage and strength to leave? Because so often every aspect of her life has been impacted, and he will set out to destroy her in every aspect of her life, financially, socially, professionally, and sometimes physically. So quietly, secretly, step by step, it would be helpful for her to start reaching out and gathering her allies, doing quiet interviews of attorneys, paying cash if he or she won't give her a free consult, so there's no paper trail, getting up burner phones so she can make these secret calls that won't appear on the phone bill, getting a private investigator if she thinks that she's being stalked, or if he's hiding assets. Then perhaps she can do some quiet research on her own, some hidden asset investigation through a forensic financial investigator, not a forensic accountant, way beyond that in the terms of level of sophistication, to start tracking down these hidden assets. Sometimes there's that sense that there are only a few ways that a perpetrator can leave his partner and maintain his dignity and his social influence. And one of those reasons is if his wife is deemed to be crazy, mentally unbalanced. That's when she must be on the lookout. Is she experiencing sleep deprivation? Because that's a sure way to drive someone crazy, to have them start hallucinating. Is he monitoring her, surveilling her in a way that's starting to make her feel and even look paranoid? That's something for her to be very aware of, because most people in the professional world cannot conceive that someone could be that diabolical, that cunning, that calculating. He's a doctor, he's a therapist, he's a physician. He couldn't possibly have this dark side. That's what we're up against, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And the first step is for her to break through that cognitive dissonance and recognize her husband is both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But she must never let him know that she's found out about who he truly is, because he will set out to destroy her for unmasking him. So quietly, secretly gathering her allies, one step at a time. That's the road to freedom.
So it looks like there needs to be a lot of secret planning other than just reaching out. There has to be methodical planning. So in reality, is it even once you know that you are in an abusive relationship, even if you have it planned in your mind, uh, is how easy it is to actually extract yourself out of such a situation in real life.
It will be one of the most difficult, most challenging moves she ever makes in her life. I say that a woman leaves an abusive relationship 3 times. The first time is in her mind when she imagines what life could be like, waking up in a home where she feels free, where she doesn't have to edit every word she says, where she doesn't feel like a prisoner in her own home. It's actually a form of human trafficking, what happens so often to women, especially if they give up their career for the sake of their partner and they stay home to raise the children. She loses that financial power. It's one of the main reasons why women stay in an abusive relationship, and it's one of the main reasons why she goes back. So it's so very difficult. That first step, leaving in her mind to imagine this home that's her sanctuary, which she truly deserves. The second time she leaves a perpetrator is physically, geographically, when she actually moves out, hopefully with the children, if she can protect them as well. Um, the third time she leaves is in her mind when she exorcises the demon of his voice telling her she'll never make it. He'll hunt her down. He'll destroy her. She's got nothing to offer the world. No other man would ever put up with her the way he did. That voice can be the most difficult to free herself from. But as I said before, over 70% of domestic violence incidents happen after a woman leaves an abusive relationship. So it's extremely difficult. And that's why it's so important for her to gather her allies around her, to confide in safe, trusted people who are in a position of power to help her. She may even, if it seems appropriate, and I know it's not always appropriate, and some depends on the town you live in. We're very fortunate with where we have our domestic violence agency to have the support of our local police. And I recommend that if women are in a town where they are able to trust their local police, that they reach out to a detective who has experience dealing with domestic violence issues and starting to share her story with with that detective to so she can get some proper safety planning uh, when she as she's thinking about leaving, when she's leaving, and after she's left, because that's when her life will be most at risk. So, as difficult as it is, it's not impossible. Uh, there, she can very often predict the trajectory of what her life will look like if she stays in an abusive relationship. It tends to be a downward spiral. That cycle of abuse I talked about before, the honeymoon period. It begins with the honeymoon period. Then there's that escalation, that sense of tension building, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it drops, where there's the verbal or physical or sexual explosion that's wounding and terrifying. And then peace again for a while until the tension begins to build. That cycle over time begins to look like a downward spiral where she's losing more and more contact with the world, more and more sense of who she is, what her life plans are all about, her own personal identity is being eroded. So that cycle of violence becomes that downward spiral that can end up in death, physical death, or death of the spirit, total subjugation, surrender. It's game over. Um, and that's the saddest thing in the world, to be this sort of walking wounded where you've lost all hope. So what we like to do is try to catch women before they reach that very bottom part of that downward spiral and help them understand that yes, it is difficult. Yes, it will be probably the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. But freedom is so worth it, so worth the risk. Think about what happened to many of our ancestors, how they left a country that where they were experiencing oppression. And domestic abuse is a form of oppression. It's writ large in countries where one country with power and influence invades another country with less power, less influence, and takes over and treats the country like hostages. We see it on the microscopic level in a home, where a man's home is his castle, as they used to say in the 50s and 60s. But then when he becomes a tyrant and she becomes a servant in her own home, which is no longer her home but a battlefield, a prison cell, you can see the cost it will take, the toll it will take on her and on her children, which are at risk of actually becoming like their abusive parent when they grow up. It's not 100% determined, they do have that choice in the end about whether to model what they've seen to bring someone into their life that treats them poorly, to treat their partner poorly, or to go that third road where they decide they're going to treat their intimate partner with so much more love and affection and care and respect and compassion than they saw growing up, because they know what it looks like not to have those things. You can learn from negative example, and that's where the hope lies. As difficult as this road is to leave and to start again, to rebuild their life, in the end, it is so worth it. Each woman, each child has their own destiny in their own hands. And the good news is that as damaging as domestic abuse is to one's mind, heart, psyche, whether you're an adult or a child, because of the neuroplasticity of the brain, there is always hope for change and growth and recovery and freedom.
So it looks like strength, courage, and support, I guess.
Absolutely. You nailed
Charles?
it. You said in 3 words what I took half an hour to say. Thank you.
No, I'm just summarizing. What you said was just absolutely
You
beautiful.
know, Ruth,
And I'm gonna
it's actually
let Charles take over.
thanks, Sonal. You know, Ruth, it's quite amazing because every time you're speaking, we're all listening intently because we feel your emotion. I can see that, and we can actually see that you've worked with the victims and you're speaking the language that you've heard from them, because everything you've said is so true. And a lot of people don't even realize that they're in an abusive relationship, like you said. And you mentioned something about, you know, the death of the spirit. And I'm going to address the questions that the viewers are asking at this point, because that's what everybody is feeling right now, that a lot of people have seen the rise of the domestic abuse cases in the current circumstances. And the death of the spirit is actually, quote unquote, the word you use, because women are not being able to walk away or run away from it. They are stuck in a lockdown situation, in the current situation. I want you to actually give a message out to those women, give them the advice either to survive it, or if they were to walk away, what to do. I do know that France has set up, you know, like you were talking about upper to middle class women, France has set up pharmacies where you can go and complain. In India, we've got the mother dairy booths because women can go to buy vegetables, so they can complain there. I want you to give a piece of advice to the women who are stuck in the current situation in a domestic abusive relationship.
It's so hard for them. I want to start by acknowledging the pain, the suffering, the fear that so many women are suffering right now. We get a little taste of what it feels like to be a prisoner in your own home. All of us around the world are getting a taste of that now, to feel trapped, like you can't go out, it's not safe, that COVID is going to get you. This invisible, this unseen enemy that is pervasive and creeps up on you, and before you know it, you're stricken with it, and it could cost you your life. And what an appropriate metaphor that is for domestic abuse. The unseen, invisible enemy that creeps up on you, and before you know it, you're a prisoner in your home and on this sort of downward trajectory. And it is, over time, it can be easy to give up hope. I have most of our ladies, and I've worked with over 1,400 women now from all over the world, all religions, all races, all ethnic backgrounds, all sisters because of their common experience. That's the beauty when they all come together. We're like a United Nations meeting. But they have this sort of common experience of having felt trapped with no way out. And some have even said, well, if I got cancer and died, at least I could die with dignity then. That's that sense of hopelessness that's infiltrated their very soul. So to acknowledge that, and to it's super important for them to recognize that, yes, this is what life is looking like right now, but it doesn't have to look like this for the rest of your life, for eternity. We survived the Black Plague. We survived the Spanish flu. We've survived AIDS and SARS and MRSA and MERS and the swine flu. All kinds of things have happened in our lifetime. and we've maybe had this feeling that there was this kind of Armageddon moment, and we've lived through them and we've come out the other side. Domestic abuse is like that. It's your Armageddon. It's this feeling that your world has collapsed. What happened to the carefree, happy spirit you once were before? If you had somebody that was going to open their home to you before, and now is saying, no, I'm afraid because of COVID. I can't let you stay here now. There's another door closed. Um, uh, if there was a hotel that you were going to stay at, or an apartment that you're going to rent, and now hotels it's harder to get a place there, or with renting a place, sometimes landlords are even reluctant to show property now because of the fear of the virus. And financially, what happened to if you had if you were heavily invested in the stock market, are you feeling now that you can't afford to start again at this moment? Are you feeling like he's taken control of all the finances? So the first step is to recognize that this too shall pass. COVID will pass. We will eventually get a vaccine. The situation you're in will eventually get better. Over time, it will get better. You may feel trapped now. You may be trapped now. But remember what I said about the first time you escape? In your mind. And that's what you can start working on now. You can start recognizing, oh, here he's doing it again, gaslighting. Oh, he's waking me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and now he's ranting and raving at me. Oh, he may not be stalking me anymore as far as following me to work or when I go visit my friends, but now he's stalking me room to room. Now I'm aware that I have to be careful about using the phone or my laptop. I know that he could be listening to me. I'm aware of that. It's not that I'm going crazy or paranoid or imagining things. I'm living with a domestic abuser, what I like to call a power vampire, a charmer destroyer, PVCD. And these are his tactics. Once you can name the tactics, not to him, we don't call them out verbally, overtly, because this personality is very shame sensitive, will punish you for recognizing who he is, and you'll be telling him he has to up his game and be more subtle in how subversive and manipulative he is. So if you can identify what he's doing in your mind, recognizing that you are one of many sisters all over the planet, you are already not alone anymore. We're all here with you in spirit. You lovely ladies who are hosting the show today because you care about this topic, you who are working for the Indian government to bring awareness to this issue, you all clearly care about these women, about this topic. And everybody tuning in this morning, they all clearly care. If you haven't experienced this yourself, you must know someone who's been through it. 1 in 3 women on the planet, and that's just the severe form. So we all know somebody, if we've not been somebody who's suffered this type of abuse. You, my friend, if you are in this home with your perpetrator, are not alone. Secretly, silently, you can start to begin rebuild your inner resources. Shore up those deposits so you can draw on them later. Build your inner strength through prayer, meditation, mindfulness exercises. These are things he has no control over what goes on in your mind. Don't let him see that you recognize who he truly is. If you're totally trapped, you're free in your mind. If you're able to get out, go for a walk. If you have a friend that you can go visit, if it's safe, can you get them to get a burner phone for you? Can they start making some sensitive calls to attorneys for you? Can you start quietly building your credit? If you have your own credit card, start stockpiling money, getting gift cards, doing some quiet visits with attorneys from your friend's home, making these quiet calls. Can you tune in to my support group? Now we're a global village. I have women that call in from all over because geography isn't a factor anymore. I have ladies still living with their partner who sneak out to their cars, who go for a drive, saying they're just going to clear their head, or I have ladies who say they're listening in, they're listening to a podcast. Others say they're going to a Bible study. We're very spiritual here, so I believe that there is a benevolent force. I don't care what you call it, but watching over us and That's the reason why I'm still alive. But we invite our ladies to listen in whatever capacity. Sometimes they're free to participate, sometimes only to listen. And it's by sneaking out into their backyard to a quiet room in the house, going for a walk. So they listen in. Sometimes they will participate if it's safe to do so, and they can hear other women's stories and know that they're speaking the same language. They're hearing similar stories, and they know they're not alone anymore. So step by step, recognizing that this too shall pass. There is a way out. There is a road to freedom. Our ancestors traveled that road. It took many, many years and lots of strength, lots of courage, lots of perseverance, all of your qualities, and lots of allies, so they can begin to build those even now. That's starting within.
Wow, wow, beautiful. Thank you for that, because I think this is going to inspire the women who are going through it, and they are going to survive. They're going to start thinking. And Sonal and Annie, I'm going to, if there are any questions, because we are at the time limit that we usually work on, but if there's any question that you'd like to address, Ruth, we might not be able to catch her again. So please do go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly, because we are limited for time. A really odd question here. Ruth, at any point in a relationship, do you say is there any type of abuse that is acceptable in a relationship? Because at least you've got food on the table, you've got a roof over your head, because life is hard out there. So is there at any point, do you think, okay, I can take this abuse? Is there any level of abuse that you think is acceptable?
Yes. Oh, what a perfect question. There's no one size fits all. It's what is your personal level of tolerance? Let's just say that we are all imperfect human beings. There are times in our lives where we may all say things that we regret later, hurt somebody else's feelings, lose our temper, blow our top. Aren't our kids great at pushing our buttons? Even if we say we're not going to lose our temper, well, we lost it again. Congratulations, you're human. So survivors can have these flaws because they're human. Perpetrators have these flaws typically, often, always, because they're perpetrators. But even regular partners, you could be involved with somebody and he could be the man of your dreams, but periodically a little moody. He could give you the silent treatment. I call that silent violence over time, because it's a way of shunning you and just putting a big X through your identity if it goes on too long. But does he say things that hurt your feelings? Does he put you down? Has he lost faith in your ability to ever do anything meaningful in the world? Are you starting to feel like little pieces of yourself are floating away, are being eroded? When you do a sanity check, are you feeling like you're losing your grip on what's real, what's normal, what's healthy? Has this become your new normal, to expect to be berated, that nothing you ever cook will ever be good enough? Is this your new normal, where your children are starting to act like dad? Are they starting to treat you the way your abusive partner has been treating you? Or are your children starting to suffer it in other ways? Is your sensitive one starting to talk about not really being happy to be alive? Are they starting to self-medicate with drugs, alcohol, or relationships that are way too intimate, way too early, looking for love in all the wrong places? Are you seeing the fallout in your children? Sometimes women will take whatever is thrown at them because the alternative seems so dark. But it's when it starts to impact the children, that's when they feel they must take action. And whatever comes, they are willing to take that risk for the sake of the possibility of saving their children. So yes, it's not an easy road out. And it's important to acknowledge that over 50% of women who end up homeless are homeless as a result of domestic violence. So the financial situation is a really important factor to consider. Her personal reaction, the impact on her, is really important to take into consideration. Is she suffering from anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder? Is she feeling suicidal? Are her children experiencing any of those symptoms? These are all super important to weigh against food on the table and a roof over their head. Sometimes the alternative is worse than what's happening in the home, but many times it's better, even if it's a smaller home, even if it's even if it's not the lifestyle she was accustomed to, even if she's got to take a second job to put food on the table. It's her table. It's her home. It's her life. And even if she has to share custody with her children, sometimes it is safer to stay because she can act as a buffer between her children and her partner, who's even more abusive when she's not there. So I'm not saying that in every case it's important for a woman to leave. That's for her to decide. But after all we talked about this morning, she can make an informed decision so that if she stays until the kids are old enough to go to college, she recognizes the impact, the risks, and the pros and cons, and has made an informed decision that it is better to stay than go. But should she decide to leave, there is a way out. There are people that can support her through that process. And if she has a home where she can establish her own rules, her own culture, because every family has its culture, she can be a living example of what healthy love is like, of what setting boundaries means, of what discipline is, and discipline is not abuse. She can try to do those things still in the relationship if she is trapped at home still with her partner. It is harder, but it's still possible for her to be that loving example of what a healthy, loving parent can be.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for that. So, Sonal, Shali?
I think Ruth has addressed most of the questions that I had in mind. I just hope that women take this message and know that there is hope and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm going to let Shalini take over and the show. Thank you so much for being with us, Charles.
Thank you from all of us that you came and joined us today and gave such meaningful advice to all the women who are facing this. So thank you. And thank you, Annie and Sonal, as usual. You girls are super awesome, and it's great to be a team with you. And to the women out there, I know it's a brave step, but sometimes you have to walk away from things. Our parents brought us up to be brave, so why not? There are helpline numbers that you can reach. Gurgaon has a one-stop center that you can reach if you have domestic abuse that you're experiencing. The numbers are 181 or 1091 or 1098. And then there's Ruth, there's Annie, Sonal, and me. You can reach out to any of us. We are there to help you, but don't subject yourself to this. There is a way out, and we are here for you. Thank you for watching. It was a nice evening with all of you. And see you again. Thanks again, Ruth. Catch you soon.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you.
For today.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.